If you're honest with yourself, most of your suffering isn't coming from the world. It's steps coming from the lack of control inside you. Your thoughts run in circles, your emotions hijack your actions, your impulses pull you in directions you don't even want to go, and then you wonder why life feels chaotic, exhausting, and unfair. Buddhism has always taught a brutal but liberating truth. Your mind shapes your reality. If you don't train your mind, your life will always feel like it's happening to you. But the moment you develop inner discipline, real, steady, consistent inner discipline, everything changes. Not magically, not instantly, but deeply. Today I'll walk you through 7 transformative chapters that show exactly how inner discipline reshapes your entire life. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Mastering your attention. Your attention is the doorway to your entire reality, and most people don't even realize how recklessly they treat it. Your attention decides what you notice, what you ignore, what you think about, how you feel, and ultimately how you live. If your attention is scattered, your life becomes scattered. If your attention is chaotic, your life becomes chaotic. And if your attention is disciplined, your entire inner world starts to stabilize. Whatever controls your attention controls the direction of your life, your habits, your reactions, and even your sense of identity. Yet in the modern world, attention is the first thing people lose and the last thing they try to reclaim. The truth is uncomfortable but simple. You're not losing years to failure. You're losing thousands of tiny moments. Moments where you could have noticed your thoughts drifting. Moments where you could have chosen patience instead of impulse. Moments where you could have caught yourself before falling into old habits. You don't lose control of your life in big dramatic events. You lose it in countless unnoticed moments where your attention collapses. Every time you react without awareness, every time you let emotions push you around, every time your mind wanders into worry or distraction, you're training your mind to follow chaos rather than clarity. Buddhist practice begins with a simple but profound aim: stabilizing the mind. This isn't about forcing your thoughts to disappear. No one has ever won a war against their own mind by fighting it. Thoughts will come, thoughts will go, emotions will rise, emotions will fall. The goal isn't to stop the waves. The goal is to learn how to stand steady while they move around you. Stabilizing the mind means learning to place your attention deliberately, not where fear pushes you, not where pleasure drags you, not where habit pulls you, but where you choose to place it. That difference alone can transform your entire emotional life. When your attention is unstable, you feel like your mind is a chaotic marketplace filled with noise, movement, and confusion. Everything distracts you, everything pulls you, everything demands your emotional energy. You jump from thought to thought the way a restless person flips through channels. You start tasks and abandon them. You listen to people but absorb nothing. You try to calm down, but your mind is already sprinting ahead of you. You want peace, but your attention is feeding anything but peace. This is the default state of an untrained mind: busy, loud, reactive, and exhausted. But something powerful happens the moment you begin training your attention. At first, it feels difficult. The mind resists. It wanders. It drifts. You bring it back. It drifts again. You bring it back again. And this repetition is not a failure. It's the training. Each time you notice your mind wandering and gently return your attention to the present, you're strengthening the mental muscle that most people never develop. You're teaching the mind how to follow intention instead of impulse. Eventually, the mental noise begins to soften. The marketplace becomes less overwhelming. The thoughts still come, but they don't drag you by the throat. The emotions still rise, but they don't blur your judgment. You start to develop the ability to sit with yourself without running away. You begin to enjoy moments that once felt dull or uncomfortable. You start noticing subtle things, a breath, a sensation, the tone of someone's voice, the way your mind tries to create unnecessary stories. This new clarity isn't magical. It's simply the natural result of a trained mind. And here's what most people don't understand. Attention determines the quality of every experience you have. If your attention is trapped in the past, you relive old pain. If your attention is obsessed with the future, you create imaginary suffering. If your attention is swallowed by craving, you become restless. If your attention is consumed by fear, you become paralyzed. But when your attention stays anchored in the present, your life regains a sense of stability that most people never taste. Training your attention also reveals how little control you actually had before. You start realizing how often your mind tries to hijack your day, thinking about old arguments while you're trying to work, worrying about outcomes you can't control, drifting into fantasies, replaying regrets, reacting to every small discomfort. Before training, these patterns feel normal. After training, they become obvious. You start noticing how much unnecessary suffering your own mind has been creating. The real genius of mastering attention is this: it gives you back your choices. When your attention is weak, you react without thinking. You get triggered easily. You get pulled by emotions and stories you never examined. But when your attention is strong, you catch the reaction before it turns into action. You feel the emotion, but it doesn't own you. You see the thought, but you don't believe all of it. You experience discomfort, but you don't run from it. This single shift, response instead of reaction, can reshape your relationships, your habits, your discipline, and your entire personality. As your attention stabilizes, your inner world transforms. The mind that once felt like a chaotic marketplace begins to feel like a quiet room. The noise doesn't control you anymore. The thoughts lose their authority. The emotional storms weaken. In that quiet room, clarity appears. Clarity about yourself, clarity about your desires, clarity about your fears, clarity about the nature of suffering. You start seeing life as it is, not as your untrained mind interprets it. Mastering your attention isn't just a spiritual practice, it's the foundation of a peaceful life. Until you learn to guide your attention intentionally, you will always feel like life is happening to you. But once your attention becomes disciplined, you discover a truth that ancient Buddhist teachings have stated for centuries. Your outer reality begins to change the moment your inner reality becomes clear. And it all begins with this simple, powerful skill: mastering your attention. Chapter 2: Understanding Craving Before It Controls You. Craving is one of the most misunderstood forces in the human mind. Most people think craving simply means wanting something. But craving is much deeper, more subtle, and far more destructive than ordinary desire. In Buddhist understanding, craving is the restless internal pull that tells you you're not enough yet. You don't have enough yet. You're not where you should be yet. It is that constant whisper that insists happiness is always one step away, always somewhere else, always in the next achievement, the next possession, the next experience. It tricks you into believing that the present moment is never sufficient and that peace exists only in the next thing you chase. Craving doesn't care what you pursue. It only cares that you remain in a state of pursuit. It feeds on your dissatisfaction. It survives by convincing you that fulfillment is always external, always unreachable, always dependent on something outside your control. This is why people who try to satisfy craving end up feeling more empty, not less. The moment you fulfill one craving, another rises instantly. You get what you wanted, but the satisfaction evaporates before you even enjoy it. You achieve something meaningful, yet the mind immediately generates a new desire, a new target, a new not enough. Craving is a fire that grows stronger by feeding it. The Buddha never condemned desire itself. Wanting to grow, wanting to love, wanting to contribute, these are natural and healthy. The problem is attachment to desire, the belief that you must get what you want or you cannot be at peace. That attachment becomes an emotional chain around your neck. Craving makes you believe that life should bend to your expectations, and when it doesn't, you feel frustration, disappointment, even suffering. The craving itself, not the outcome, is the source of your mental turbulence. Most people don't recognize when craving is controlling them because it hides behind seemingly reasonable thoughts. I'll be happier when I make more money. I'll finally feel confident when I look a certain way. I'll be at peace once I fix everything wrong in my life. These thoughts sound harmless, even motivating, but underneath them lies a subtle poison, the belief that your peace depends on conditions. Buddhist wisdom strikes right at this illusion. It shows you that the mind conditioned by craving can never rest, because it always wants the next upgrade. Understanding craving begins with honest observation. Notice how craving feels in your body, a tightening in the chest, an urgency, a restlessness, an inability to be fully present. Notice how craving affects your emotions, irritability when things don't go as planned, anxiety about outcomes, jealousy when others get what you want, impatience with yourself and the world. Notice how craving affects your thoughts, constant planning, mental fantasies, fear of missing out, overthinking, and mental pressure to accomplish something you haven't even started. Craving disguises itself as ambition, love, passion, or discipline, but the emotional tone gives it away. It never feels peaceful. It always feels tense, urgent, or incomplete. Once you begin to see craving clearly, something remarkable happens. Its power weakens, not because you force yourself to let go, but because craving loses the ability to deceive you. You start noticing when your mind tries to push you into unnecessary chase. You start recognizing when desire turns into compulsion. You begin seeing the difference between wanting something intentionally and being dragged by craving unconsciously. This clarity alone breaks half the chain. Inner discipline does not mean destroying all desire. It means understanding when desire is healthy and when it becomes a trap. A healthy desire feels spacious, steady, and aligned with your values. Craving feels desperate and noisy, pulling you away from present awareness. When you learn to differentiate the two, you stop wasting energy on pursuits that don't matter and stop letting craving dictate your emotional state. People who are controlled by craving live in a constant emotional swing, excited when they anticipate getting what they want, miserable when reality doesn't match their expectations, temporarily satisfied when they succeed, then empty again when the craving returns. This cycle can last decades. Entire lives are drained in the hope that just one more step will finally fill the internal void. But craving is not a void you fill, it's a habit you break by understanding it. Buddhist practice helps you step outside this cycle. Instead of automatically obeying every craving, you learn to pause and question it. Is this desire coming from wisdom or from restlessness? Will this actually bring peace, or am I chasing a feeling that won't last? This level of awareness is powerful. It cuts through illusion. It gives you space to choose instead of compulsively reacting. When you stop letting craving run your life, you start reclaiming your mind. You notice that you can appreciate the present moment instead of constantly reaching for something else. You discover that peace comes from clarity, not completion. You realize that the external world doesn't need to rearrange itself for you to feel grounded. Your sense of stability begins to come from within, not from outcomes. And here is the most liberating realization. The moment craving loses its grip on you, you don't lose passion, you gain freedom. You can still work hard, still pursue growth, still build a meaningful life. But now your effort is rooted in clarity, not desperation. You no longer chase to escape yourself. You act because it's aligned, not because you're trying to satisfy an inner hunger that never goes away. Understanding craving doesn't make you passive. It makes you powerful. It frees you from emotional dependency on outcomes. It gives you the ability to enjoy effort without drowning in expectation. It allows you to choose desires that align with your path, instead of being puppeted by impulses. This is what it means to stop craving from controlling you. This is how discipline begins. Chapter 3. Training the mind to respond, not react. Reactivity is one of the biggest sources of suffering, and most people have no idea how much damage it does because they live on autopilot. A word triggers them, and they explode. A disappointment hits, and they fall apart. A fear surfaces, and they shut down. Their emotions yank them around like a puppet, and they think this is just how life is. It's not. It's simply the behavior of an untrained mind. Reactions are automatic, fast, emotional, and usually blind. They don't come from clarity. They come from habit. They are conditioned responses built over years, patterns absorbed from childhood, society, fear, insecurity, and past wounds. When something happens, your mind doesn't pause to understand it. It immediately launches into a story, an assumption, a defense, or an emotional spiral. Before you even have a chance to breathe, you're already acting out the old pattern again. You might regret it later, but in the moment, it feels instantaneous and unavoidable. This is what reactivity does. It steals your freedom, because as long as you react automatically, you are not choosing your actions, you are repeating your conditioning, and nothing changes in your life when you operate like this. You keep getting into the same arguments, attracting the same problems, making the same mistakes, and creating the same suffering. You're not responding to life, you're replaying your past over and over again. Buddhist practice introduces a simple but revolutionary idea. Between the event and your action, there is a space, a small space, a quiet space, and inside that space lies your power. Reactivity ignores that space. Mindfulness expands it. When you learn to notice your inner reactions as they rise, before they turn into behavior, you shift from being controlled by your mind to becoming the one who guides it. Training the mind to respond begins with awareness. You must first learn to catch yourself in the early moments of reactivity, the tightening in your chest, the heat in your face, the sudden rush of anger, the anxiety triggered by uncertainty, the impulse to defend yourself immediately. These sensations are not enemies, they are signals. They tell you that your mind is preparing a reaction based on old patterns. If you catch the signal early enough, you interrupt the automatic chain. But awareness alone is not enough. Once you notice the reaction rising, the next step is to pause. This pause isn't passive, it's an intentional act of strength. It allows the emotion to appear without letting it hijack your behavior. The pause is where clarity slips in. It's the space where you breathe, where you evaluate, where you observe the urge without obeying it. That single breath gives you more power than 100 impulsive actions ever will. As you start pausing more often, you begin to recognize the real nature of your reactions. Often, you'll notice they're exaggerated. Someone makes a small comment, and your mind inflates it into an insult. A minor inconvenience happens, and your mind turns it into a catastrophe. A moment of fear arises, and your mind starts building worst-case scenarios. Most reactions are not responses to the present moment. They are echoes of your unresolved emotions. Responding, on the other hand, is conscious. It comes from clarity, not conditioning. It means acting with intention instead of impulse. It means choosing what aligns with your values instead of what matches your emotional turbulence. When you respond, You think before you move. You consider the consequences. You look at the situation cleanly, without the haze of old wounds or habitual thinking. The transformation is profound. Arguments that would have lasted hours end in minutes. Problems that once overwhelmed you shrink into manageable tasks. Emotional storms that used to consume you start losing their force. Little by little, you start realizing that the world isn't triggering you as much as your untrained mind was. And with training, the storms settle. Here's the difficult truth. Most people avoid your reactions are not caused by other people or situations. They're caused by the meaning your mind adds to them. Two people can experience the same event and react completely differently depending on the stories their minds create. Training the mind to respond means questioning those stories. Is this really true? Is this reaction helpful? What am I believing right now that might not be accurate? These questions weaken the grip of habitual thinking. Over time, the gap between experience and action becomes wider. You start recognizing triggers before they explode. You start feeling emotions without drowning in them. You start noticing thoughts without becoming them. Instead of jumping into drama, you observe it from a distance. Instead of escalating conflict, you calm it. Instead of reacting with old patterns, you behave with new understanding. This is the beginning of emotional maturity, the moment you stop reacting and start responding. And the beauty of this practice is that you don't need to be perfect. Even one mindful response can shift the direction of an entire day. Even one pause can prevent a regrettable moment. Even one moment of clarity can break years of conditioning. Little by little, your nervous system learns that it doesn't need to panic, overthink, defend, or escape. It learns it can sit with experience and choose wisely. The goal isn't to suppress emotions. Responding doesn't mean being indifferent or robotic. It means engaging with the world from a place of steadiness rather than chaos. When you respond instead of react, you maintain your inner balance even when the outer world is unpredictable. You stop being a victim of impulses and begin shaping your life with intention. This is the heart of inner discipline. It's not about controlling everything. It's about controlling yourself. When you train your mind to respond, you reclaim your freedom, your peace, and your power. The world doesn't become easier. You become stronger. You start seeing life with clarity instead of confusion, and that one shift can change the entire trajectory of your reality. Chapter 4. Becoming the observer of your own mind. Most people live their entire lives trapped inside their thoughts, without ever realizing there is another option. They believe every thought, absorb every emotion, and identify with every mental story as if it is absolute truth. If a fearful thought appears, they assume danger must be real. If an angry thought appears, they assume someone must be wrong. If a sad thought appears, they assume life must be hopeless. They don't recognize that thoughts are simply mental events, not commands. They come and go like clouds, yet most people treat them like law. This is the root of so much unnecessary suffering. Buddhism teaches something radically different. There is a part of you that can watch your mind instead of being dragged around by it. This is the observer, the awareness behind the thoughts, the quiet witness that remains unchanged no matter what appears in the mind. When you learn to shift into this awareness, you create distance between yourself and the noise inside you. Suddenly, thoughts lose their authority. Emotions lose their ability to dominate you. Mental stories lose their power to shape your actions without your permission. Becoming the observer begins with a simple realization: you are not your thoughts. If you were your thoughts, you wouldn't be able to notice them. You wouldn't be able to say, "My mind is overthinking," or "I'm feeling anxious right now." The very fact that you can observe your own mind means there is a deeper layer of awareness behind it. That awareness doesn't panic, doesn't judge, doesn't cling. it simply sees. But most people never tap into this awareness because they're too busy reacting to everything their mind says. When you start observing your thoughts, you notice something surprising. Your mind talks endlessly. It comments, judges, predicts, worries, compares, defends, complains, fantasizes. It creates stories out of thin air and convinces you they're true. It relives old pain and makes you feel it again. It imagines future disasters and makes you suffer them before they even happen. The mind is a storyteller that never stops, and you suffer only when you believe every story it tells. The moment you become the observer, you see the mind for what it really is, an engine that produces thoughts, not a master you must obey. Observing doesn't mean suppressing. You're not trying to force thoughts away. You're simply watching them appear and disappear without grabbing onto them. A thought arises, you notice it, and it fades. Another thought arises, you notice it, and it fades. This openness weakens the mind's grip over you. This shift from "I am my thoughts" to "I am aware of my thoughts" is one of the greatest transformations you can undergo. Suddenly, anger appears as a sensation in the body rather than an identity. Fear becomes a feeling, not a prison. Sadness becomes an emotional wave, not a permanent truth. The observer sees all of this without getting caught, and the more you stay in the observer state, the more you realize that thoughts are less powerful than you believed. They only had power because you accepted them blindly. A great test of this is noticing what happens during emotional triggers. When someone says something hurtful, your mind instantly generates interpretations. They disrespected me. This always happens. I can't tolerate this. If you're identified with the mind, you will react automatically. Anger, defensiveness, withdrawal. But if you're observing, you see the emotional reaction forming before it becomes behavior. You see the mental stories beginning to form, and you realize you don't have to accept them. This alone can prevent conflict, reduce suffering, and bring clarity where chaos usually erupts. Another important part of becoming the observer is noticing the body. Before the mind creates a story, the body gives a signal. Anxiety tightens the chest, anger heats the face, sadness pulls the energy downward, craving creates restlessness. When you observe the body without immediate interpreting it, you interrupt the automatic thought-emotion cycle. You realize the sensation itself is not the problem. The problem begins when the mind interprets it through old patterns. Observing the sensation breaks the cycle and brings you back to the present moment. This practice also exposes the illusions your mind creates. You start seeing how often the mind imagines problems that never happen, relives old wounds that no longer exist, or creates expectations that reality never promised to fulfill. You discover that much of your suffering wasn't caused by life itself, but by the stories your mind kept feeding you. This insight isn't meant to make you reject your mind, but to help you use it wisely. The mind is a tool, not a dictator. Over time, observing becomes second nature. You begin moving through life with more spaciousness. Conversations become clearer because you're not lost in inner reactions. Decisions become wiser because you're not rushing under pressure. Stress becomes easier to manage because you can see it rather than drown in it. You develop emotional resilience, not by forcing yourself to be strong, but by seeing thoughts and emotions as temporary events, not permanent truths. Eventually, a deeper understanding emerges. The observer is not affected by any of the mental noise. It remains still, even when the mind is restless. It remains steady, even when emotions are turbulent. It remains open, even when sensations are uncomfortable. This realization creates a stability that no external circumstance can shake. Life continues with its ups and downs, but you are no longer dragged through every peak and valley. You experience everything without being owned by anything. This is the essence of becoming the observer of your own mind. It is the foundation of inner freedom. It is how you break cycles of emotional reactivity. It is how you find peace, not by controlling life, but by understanding the mind. When you learn to observe instead of identify, you stop being a prisoner of your thoughts and start becoming the master of your inner world. Chapter 5. Letting go of what you cannot control. One of the deepest sources of human suffering comes from fighting reality. People spend enormous amounts of energy trying to control things that were never in their hands to begin with. Other people's behavior, the outcomes of their plans, the pace of their progress, the judgments of society, the timing of life, even the past itself. The more they cling, the more they struggle. The more they struggle, the more they suffer. And the most painful part is that none of this effort actually changes anything. It only exhausts the mind and traps it in a cycle of frustration. Buddhism cuts straight through this illusion with a truth most people avoid. Suffering is born not from life itself, but from your insistence that life should be different than it is. You cannot control everything. You cannot force people to act the way you wish. You cannot prevent every hardship. You cannot bend the world to your expectations. But you can control how you respond. You can control what you carry. You can control what you release. That distinction, choosing your effort wisely, is the heart of letting go. Letting go does not mean giving up, becoming passive, or living without ambition. That's a childish misunderstanding. Letting go means understanding the limits of your power and refusing to waste your life pushing against walls that will never move. It means learning to direct your effort where it actually matters, your actions, your decisions, your habits, your attitude, your inner stability. Everything outside of that is not yours to control, and holding on to it only creates strain. There are several layers to this practice, and each one reveals how tightly the mind clings. The first layer is letting go of how people should behave. You may want people to treat you fairly, to understand you, to appreciate you, to love you, but people act according to their own minds, not your expectations. When you demand that people behave in a way that matches your ideals, you set yourself up for constant disappointment. Letting go doesn't mean tolerating mistreatment. It means recognizing you cannot control someone's nature, but you can control your boundaries, your standards, and your distance. The second layer is letting go of outcomes. You can work hard, prepare carefully, and give your best, but the outcome is never guaranteed. People suffer when they tie their peace to results. They pin their happiness on things that depend on 100 variables outside their control. Letting go means doing what you can with full presence and accepting that the rest is not yours to command. It means pouring your effort into the process and releasing the obsession with results. The third layer is letting go of the past. This is where many people remain stuck. They replay old mistakes, old betrayals, old regrets, old versions of themselves that no longer exist. But the past is not something you hold. It's something your mind holds on to. Letting go means acknowledging what happened, learning what you can, and refusing to let old pain shape your present identity. It doesn't mean forgetting. It means not carrying the burden any longer. The fourth layer is letting go of the future. People think the future is stressful, but the future doesn't exist yet. What stresses you is your thoughts about the future, the fear, the uncertainty, the imagined outcomes, the catastrophizing. The mind believes it can control the future by worrying about it, but worry never changes what will happen. It only steals the peace you could be experiencing now. Letting go means planning wisely but refusing to mentally live in what hasn't arrived. The fifth layer is letting go of the need to control how life unfolds. Life moves on its own timeline, not yours. Opportunities come when they come. Difficulties arise whether you're ready or not. People enter and leave your life without asking your permission. Things grow slowly, then all at once. The universe does not operate according to your schedule. Letting go means understanding that life is not meant to be controlled, but understood and navigated with clarity. When you start practicing letting go, something unexpected happens. You begin to feel lighter. The tension you've been carrying for years starts to loosen. You stop gripping life so tightly. You stop treating uncertainty as an enemy. You stop drowning in resistance. You discover a deeper truth. Letting go is not losing control. It's losing the illusion that you ever had control. And in that moment, your mind becomes more relaxed, flexible, and open to what the present moment actually offers. This does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. Caring is healthy. Clinging is destructive. Caring moves you to action. Clinging paralyzes you with fear. Caring allows you to engage with life fully. Clinging makes you rigid, anxious, and exhausted. Letting go replaces clinging with clarity. It gives you the ability to move through life without becoming entangled in every event. As you become better at letting go, you start noticing something powerful. Peace becomes more accessible, not because life becomes easier, but because your resistance becomes weaker. You realize that most of your suffering wasn't caused by the event itself. It was caused by your refusal to accept it. Once you accept reality as it is, you can respond wisely, adjust your actions, and move forward without unnecessary mental weight. Letting go also strengthens emotional resilience. When setbacks happen, you don't collapse. When people disappoint you, you don't take it personally. When plans fail, you pivot instead of breaking. When life shifts direction, you adapt instead of clinging to an old map. You develop a kind of inner spaciousness, a mind that welcomes experiences without fighting them, a heart that remains steady even when the world changes. Over time, letting go becomes less of a practice and more of a natural way of being. You act without attachment, love without possession, strive without desperation, and move through life with a clarity that most people never reach. You cultivate a mind that flows instead of resists, a mind that understands one simple truth. Peace comes not from controlling life, but from releasing what was never yours to control in the first place. Chapter 6. Practicing consistency instead of intensity. Most people sabotage their own growth because they worship intensity and ignore consistency. They want dramatic change, fast transformation, overnight discipline, instant peace, instant clarity. They push themselves with bursts of motivation, then collapse when the motivation disappears, as it always does. They try to meditate for an hour one day, then skip the next 5. They promise themselves radical life changes, only to abandon them the moment things get difficult. Their entire growth pattern is unstable because it depends on emotion, not discipline. Buddhist practice takes the opposite approach. It doesn't care about intensity. It doesn't rely on emotional excitement. It doesn't push you into extremes. It focuses on something far more powerful: steadiness, small, sustainable, repetitive practice that reshapes the mind slowly but permanently. A few minutes of mindful breathing every day is more transformative than an hour of forced meditation once a week. A single moment of conscious awareness, repeated 1,000 times, does more for your mind than a day of spiritual inspiration, followed by a week of neglect. The ego hates consistency because consistency lacks drama. There is no adrenaline rush in doing something small but steady, no emotional high, no fantasy of sudden enlightenment. Consistency is quiet, it's ordinary, it's disciplined. It's the daily choice to return to yourself even when you don't feel like it, and that is exactly why it works. because it builds the mental patterns that shape your entire inner life. Intensity is temporary. Consistency is identity. When you rely on intensity, you depend on your mood, which is unstable. When you rely on consistency, you build habits which are stable. You stop being someone who occasionally practices mindfulness and become someone whose mind naturally leans toward awareness because repetition has rewired it. This principle applies to everything: your emotional health, your focus, your discipline, your peace, your habits, your reactions. Consistency turns effort into character. You don't become calm by meditating once. You become calm by training your mind to return to calmness repeatedly. You don't become wise by reading a book and forgetting it. You become wise by applying small insights again and again until they become part of how you think. You don't become disciplined by doing something huge once. You become disciplined by showing up continuously. The mind reshapes itself through repetition. Whatever you repeat becomes familiar, and whatever becomes familiar becomes automatic. This is how old patterns are formed, and this is how new patterns are built. If you repeat anger, anger becomes your default. If you repeat avoidance, avoidance becomes your instinct. If you repeat mindfulness, mindfulness becomes your baseline. If you repeat presence, presence becomes your home. Consistency rewrites the coding of your mind. But why do people resist consistency? Because consistency demands humility. It asks you to do simple things daily, without applause, without excitement, without immediate results. The ego wants transformation to feel heroic. It wants big achievements, big declarations, big leaps. But the mind doesn't change through leaps. It changes through steps. Small steps repeated endlessly. Buddhism emphasizes this through the concept of continuous practice, a path built not on peak moments, but on sustained awareness. When you meditate regularly, the mind gradually becomes less reactive. When you practice mindful breathing daily, the nervous system slowly becomes calmer. When you consistently observe your thoughts, the mind becomes less entangled. The changes are subtle at first, almost invisible, but they accumulate. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and suddenly you realize you've become someone entirely different, not because of a single intense moment, but because of hundreds of quiet ones. Consistency also protects you from the emotional roller coaster of extremes. When your practice is steady, you don't collapse every time your mood changes. You don't rely on motivation to guide your actions. You don't become a prisoner of feeling like it. You act from intention, not emotion. You show up with clarity, not impulse. This stability gives you a sense of inner power because you're no longer controlled by your shifting internal states. Another benefit of consistency is that it trains you to meet discomfort with patience. When you do something every day, you inevitably face days when you're tired, distracted, restless, or unmotivated. But showing up anyway teaches you resilience. It teaches you that discipline is not about feeling good, but about staying committed. It teaches you that discomfort is not an enemy, but a doorway to growth. This is how you learn to stay steady, even when the mind is noisy. Intensity creates burnout. Consistency builds endurance. Intensity exhausts you. Consistency strengthens you. Intensity depends on conditions. Consistency survives conditions. This is why monasteries don't train practitioners through extreme effort. They train through routine, rhythm, and repetition. Simple practices done daily create profound transformation. When consistency becomes a way of life, everything changes. You stop expecting giant leaps and start valuing small progress. You stop judging yourself harshly and start understanding the process. You stop rushing and start trusting patience. The mind becomes less chaotic because it finally has structure. Your attention becomes sharper because it's trained every day. Your emotions become more stable because you've built the capacity to sit with them repeatedly. Over time, you realize that consistency is not just a practice, it's a form of self-respect. It means you show up for your own growth. You keep promises to yourself. You choose long-term peace over short-term comfort. You move gradually toward the person you want to become, instead of waiting for inspiration to rescue you. There is deep dignity in this kind of effort. Most importantly, consistency brings you into harmony with the reality of growth. Nothing in nature grows through intensity. Trees don't shoot up in one day. Rivers don't carve valleys in an afternoon. Mountains don't form through a single eruption. Nature grows slowly, steadily, layer by layer. The mind is no different. It transforms through small, repeated acts of clarity. When you finally embrace consistency, not as a chore but as the path, you unlock one of the greatest truths of inner discipline. You don't change your life in a dramatic moment. You change it in countless quiet moments that no one sees. And those quiet moments, repeated with patience, reshape everything. Chapter 7. Living with inner quiet and outer clarity. When inner discipline becomes natural, something fundamental shifts inside you. The noise that once controlled your mind begins to lose its authority. The emotional storms that used to overwhelm you start to weaken. You realize that peace was never something you needed to chase. It was something you needed to create by changing the way you relate to your own mind. This is where the deepest transformation occurs, when the inner quiet you've been cultivating begins to change the way you experience the outer world. Inner quiet is not the absence of thought or emotion. It's the absence of being controlled by thought or emotion. It is a mental stillness that remains steady even while thoughts continue to flow. It is an emotional spaciousness that allows feelings to rise and fade without drowning you. It is a clarity that doesn't depend on perfect conditions, because it comes from the awareness you've developed, not from external circumstances. Most people believe peace comes from fixing everything outside. Buddhism teaches that peace comes from stabilizing what's inside. As your mind quiets, your perception sharpens. You start seeing things with a kind of clarity that was impossible when you were lost in reactivity and noise. You notice details you overlooked before, the tone of someone's voice, the tension in your body during stress, the stories your mind creates during discomfort, the assumptions you make before understanding the situation, the way craving tries to hijack your choices. This clarity is a natural result of the inner stillness you've cultivated. When the lake of the mind becomes still, you finally see the reflections clearly. This clarity transforms the way you engage with life. Conversations feel different because you're not constantly interpreting or reacting, you're actually listening. Decisions feel easier because you're not rushing under pressure, you're responding with intention. Stress becomes manageable because you're not adding stories on top of the experience, you're seeing the situation as it is. Even challenges begin to feel less threatening because you're no longer overwhelmed by your own mental noise. The world doesn't change, but the way you experience it does, and that changes everything. Inner quiet also reveals how much unnecessary tension you were carrying before. You start noticing how often your mind tightened around expectations, how often you resisted reality, how often you created pressure for yourself that didn't need to exist. When you release these habits, even simple moments become peaceful, eating becomes more mindful, walking becomes grounding, conversations feel more authentic, rest feels deeper, silence stops feeling uncomfortable and becomes restorative. Another powerful transformation happens in your relationships. When your mind is quiet, you stop expecting others to fill emotional gaps inside you. You stop demanding impossible perfection from people. You stop projecting your insecurities onto them. You approach relationships with clarity instead of neediness, with presence instead of fear, with awareness instead of unconscious patterns. This alone can heal years of misunderstanding and conflict. And because you're no longer carrying internal chaos, you stop contributing chaos to your environment. You speak less impulsively, you react less harshly, you listen more fully, you communicate more honestly, you become a stabilizing presence for others instead of a source of emotional turbulence. People feel calmer around you because your calm is genuine, not forced, not pretended, but developed through inner discipline. This inner quiet does not mean life stops being difficult. Challenges still arise. People still disappoint. Plans still fail. Unexpected events still shake your routine. But the difference is that your mind is no longer fragile. You're not thrown off balance every time something shifts. Instead of collapsing into panic or frustration, you observe the situation with stability. You see clearly what needs to be done. You take action without fear driving you. You adjust without drowning in resistance. Your inner quiet becomes your grounding force. At this stage, the mind becomes a reliable companion rather than an unpredictable enemy. Thoughts arise, but they don't dominate. Emotions appear, but they don't take over. Desires surface, but they don't blind you. You can feel everything deeply without being controlled by anything. This is true strength, not the kind that comes from suppression, but the kind that comes from understanding. Outer clarity naturally follows. You begin making decisions not from panic, insecurity, or impulse, but from stillness. You begin choosing relationships, habits, and environments that align with peace rather than chaos. You begin removing what drains you and nurturing what supports you. Clarity shows you what to hold on to and what to release. It shows you when to act and when to wait. It shows you when something is truly important and when it's simply a product of old conditioning. Over time, you discover that this inner quiet is not something you turn on only during meditation. It becomes a way of being. It's with you in conversations, during stress, during joy, during conflict, during uncertainty. It's in the way you breathe, the way you speak, the way you move through the world. It becomes the foundation of your personality, not just a temporary mental state. This is one of the deepest aims of Buddhist practice, to cultivate a mind that remains steady regardless of the world's changing nature. A mind that understands itself so well it no longer creates unnecessary suffering. A mind that stays open, compassionate and aware. A mind that is not at war with itself. Inner quiet is not the end of the path. It's the beginning of a completely different way of living. It's the doorway to wisdom, emotional freedom, genuine connection, deeper intuition, and a life that feels aligned instead of chaotic. It is the state in which you finally experience yourself without distortion, and when you live from this place, everything in your outer life begins to reflect that clarity. This is the transformation you've been working toward, a mind that no longer pulls you in every direction, a life no longer governed by noise, and a reality shaped by the quiet strength within you. Chapter 8. Building a life that reflects your inner transformation. Once inner discipline begins to solidify, the final step is integrating it into your outer life. Many people think inner growth is something that stays inside, that it's just meditation, self-awareness, emotional balance, and peace. But that's incomplete. True transformation eventually demands expression. What happens inside must begin shaping what you choose outside. Your habits, your environment, your relationships, your priorities, your boundaries, your lifestyle, and the way you move through the world. Otherwise, you end up with a peaceful mind trapped inside a chaotic life. This chapter is about alignment, the process of allowing your outer world to reflect who you are becoming inside. And make no mistake, this is where many people stumble. They meditate, they reflect, they understand, they grow internally, but they don't change anything externally. They keep the same toxic habits, the same draining environment, the same emotional triggers, the same unhealthy patterns, the same influences that keep pulling them back into old versions of themselves. And then they wonder why their inner peace disappears the moment they step back into the world. Inner work is powerful, but without outer alignment it won't last. The first part of this alignment is shaping your environment. Your environment is not neutral, it constantly affects your mind. The people you interact with, the spaces you spend time in, the content you consume, the conversations you participate in, all of it influences your inner state. A chaotic environment feeds a chaotic mind. A noisy environment feeds a noisy mind. When your surroundings are filled with negativity, drama, clutter, or emotional instability, your mind absorbs it automatically. You don't rise above your environment. You get shaped by it. That's how the mind works. So the path forward is simple but difficult. You create a space that supports your peace. This may mean cleaning your physical space, removing distractions, limiting certain interactions, reducing digital noise, or spending more time in nature. It may mean choosing silence over stimulation, or choosing simplicity over excess. This isn't about running away from life. It's about building a foundation where your inner clarity can survive in the real world. The second part of alignment is choosing relationships consciously. Internal growth makes you more aware of the emotional energy people carry. You start noticing how some people calm your mind while others agitate it, how some encourage growth while others pull you into old habits. You recognize that not everyone fits into the life you are creating. This realization isn't arrogance, it's awareness. You can have compassion for everyone without being close to everyone. As your inner quiet deepens, you become less tolerant of manipulation, drama, unnecessary conflict, and relationships built on emotional instability. You begin to value honesty, presence, and sincerity. You start gravitating toward people whose inner worlds match the peace you're cultivating, and you set boundaries with those who conflict with it. This is not rejection, it is self-respect. A disciplined mind cannot thrive in undisciplined environments. The third part of alignment is your habits. A stable mind requires stable habits. Your routines shape your emotional life more than you realize. If your habits are chaotic, your mind will be too. When you meditate only when you feel like it, your peace becomes unreliable. When you sleep irregularly, consume unhealthy media, avoid exercise, or constantly overstimulate yourself with screens, your mind becomes restless again. Inner discipline collapses when your lifestyle contradicts it. So you build habits that support your clarity, simple routines, steady practices, mindful pauses, intentional breaks from noise, moments of stillness scattered throughout your day. You feed your mind with the same consistency you fed your distractions before, and gradually your inner peace stops being something you experience during meditation and becomes something you carry into everyday life. The fourth part of alignment is your decisions. A disciplined mind makes different choices. You stop choosing what feels good in the moment and start choosing what leads to long-term clarity. You stop chasing temporary satisfaction and start honoring deeper values. You stop acting out of fear and start acting out of understanding. The mind you have trained becomes a guide, not a burden. You begin asking wiser questions before making decisions. Does this choice bring peace or chaos? Does this support who I want to become? Am I acting out of clarity or craving? Is this aligned with my path or pulling me away from it? These questions cut through confusion and expose the truth. And when you follow the truth repeatedly, your outer life begins to resemble your inner transformation. The fifth part of alignment is letting your life slow down, not in a lazy way, but in a conscious, deliberate pace. A disciplined mind doesn't rush. It doesn't force outcomes. It doesn't chase constant stimulation. It doesn't panic in uncertainty. You begin living with a rhythm that matches your awareness, slower, deeper, more intentional. You start valuing quality over quantity, presence over speed, clarity over urgency. You stop living in reaction to everything and start living from your center. And the final part of alignment is authenticity. When your mind becomes clear, you stop pretending. You stop performing roles, hiding insecurities, pleasing people at the cost of your peace, or wearing emotional masks. You begin expressing yourself with honesty, not bluntness, but truthfulness. You say no when you need to. You say yes when it aligns. You let your actions match your values. Authenticity becomes your default, not because you're trying to be bold, but because clarity makes pretense feel unnecessary. This integration of inner and outer worlds is the true measure of transformation. The goal of inner discipline is not to withdraw from life, but to engage with life from a place of strength. It is not to escape the world, but to move through it without being swallowed by it. When your outer life begins reflecting your inner work, you stop feeling divided. You stop feeling like two different people, one during meditation and another during stress. You begin living as one aligned being, steady from the inside out. This is where the path becomes real, when your thoughts, actions, environment, relationships and choices all begin supporting the quiet strength you've built within. Your life stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like a reflection of your true nature. Inner discipline becomes more than a practice. It becomes the foundation of the life you're creating. And from that foundation, everything else begins to unfold with clarity. If you look back at your life, you'll realize most of your suffering didn't come from the world. It came from the way your mind met the world. The noise, the craving, the reactivity, the attachment, the resistance, the inconsistency. These were the chains, not life itself, but the mind's response to life. And now you've seen the truth. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to force your way into peace. You don't need to wait for the world to soften. You only need to train the mind that experiences the world. Master your attention, and your reality stops scattering. Understand craving, and your heart stops chasing. Respond instead of react, and your peace stops breaking. Observe your mind, and illusions lose their bite. Let go of what isn't yours, and life becomes lighter. Choose consistency, and your habits reshape you. Live with inner quiet and clarity becomes natural. Align your outer life, and your path becomes steady. This is not a sudden transformation, it's a direction. Every day you take one small step. Every step strengthens the mind. Every moment of awareness deepens your freedom. And slowly, without forcing anything, you realize something profound. Your life changes the moment you change, not because the world shifts, but because the one who is experiencing the world becomes clearer, calmer, wiser. This is the path. Not loud, not dramatic, not rushed, but steady, honest, and deeply transformative. May your mind grow quiet. May your path become clear. And may you live from the inner stillness that no chaos can touch.